Welcome everybody. My name is Miranda Thain. I'm creative producer at Theatre Hullabaloo. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you today to a conversation about play as part of Jabberwocky Market and Darlington Theatre Town.
Can we have the sound turned up a bit, please?
Sorry, I will try and project. I'm just warning you now though, poor Kirsty on the end has got a sore throat, so we would do our best. We will do our best. So, to introduce you to our lovely panel, to my right we have Ed Patrick, aka Kid Carpet. And I'm going to have to read now, sorry. So, to get to know Ed a bit, Kid Carpet has picked up an international reputation as a pioneer of catchy electro-punk pop music over the last 14 years, making music with old keyboards, toys, computers, a sellotaped up broken electric guitar and a DIY attitude. Having released a string of albums and EPs, gigged all over the place and worked with cult film directors, the much-loved musician turned his hand to making theatre. Kid Carpet shows are a wild mashup of a lo-fi style with an offbeat material and songs guaranteed to put a chuckle in your heart and medicine in your soul, which is just what you need on a Sunday morning. So welcome to Ed. To Ed's right, we have Hazel Anderson, who is the deviser, performer, clown and mum. She trained at Mount View and then East 15 Drama School and co-founded Cardiff-based family theatre company Likely Story in 2006, which has successfully toured 14 shows made for and with children and young people. Almost Always Muddy, which is part of this year's Jabberwocky Market, is a collaboration between Likely Story and Kirsty Harris, who is to her right. Now Kirsty makes immersive worlds and experiences in found environments, landscapes and theatres. She's made work for babies aged 6 months and all the ages that come after. Kirsty's led design-based community projects for the Old Vic, the National Theatre, the National Trust, the V&A, the Kensington Palace, and she has worked with all sorts of exciting people from Wild Works to Knee High, Punch Drunk to the Young Vic. So it's my great pleasure, and I hope yours, to welcome the panel. Please give them a round of applause. So you've got a bit of a sense of who we are. It would be really nice to know a little bit about you guys. So if you are an artist or theatre maker, could you give us a little bit of a wave? Some wavers. Great. If you're primarily here as an audience member, could you give us a bit of a wave? Lovely, thank you. If you are an educator, a parent or somebody equally involved with young children, give us a bit of a wave. Some wavers.
And will be soon.
Good.
So mine's will be soon.
Will be soon.
So it's half a wave at the moment.
Half a wave, okay, that's great, thank you. And do you feel like you play enough in the average week? If you feel like you play enough, give us a wave.
Do we play?
Excellent. Great stuff. Okay, so we've got a bit of a sense of who you guys are as well. Not playing very much. No. So, when we were thinking about this panel, I posed the question to these guys, which was inspired by the quote that's written on a blackboard in Theatre Hullabaloo's office, which is attributed to Einstein, although a lot of quotes are attributed to Einstein that I bet he probably didn't say. But the quote was, you can learn more about someone in an hour of play than you can in a lifetime of conversation. So you can learn more about someone in an hour of play than you can in a lifetime of conversation. I thought that
define play.
Define play?
What is play?
Okay, well that's a good question and we'll be looking at that later. The Oxford English Dictionary defines play as the engagement in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than for serious or practical purpose. Subsection, take part in sport. So there you go. I think hopefully we'll be unpicking, certainly, say for example, the Lego Foundation has 5 definitions of what play is, but fundamentally it's about joy, I think, joy in exploration, but that's something that we'll be talking about as we go. So, what do you think? Can you learn, what are the certain things that you can learn about somebody through an hour of play that you can't learn through any other way? And how does that learning influence the kind of work that you guys make? Who wants to start?
I mean, I guess it's I suppose I would say that a good conversation should feel like play and playful, and that you're probably not having very good conversations if it doesn't feel like that. Because then in play is about, ideally that's where you find flow and that kind of loss of time, which sometimes referred to as flow. where you are operating purely kind of instinctually and in a sensory way to your environment. And I guess that is an exposing place. You expose, you know, in that freedom, you expose your instincts and your natural tendencies, and that's, I guess, how you would learn. You could say that you would learn about someone through observing them in play.
Yeah, it's definitely like observing someone through play. You can't hide in play, I think, whereas in conversation you can. So if you're watching someone play, you can see where they're at, and I don't think it's necessarily defining them as a person, but where they are in that moment in time. If they're feeling a little angry, how they play with an object comes out. Whether if you're in conversation with that person, you can articulate and hide that feeling, you can hide a frustration, you can hide where you're at. We're very clever up here, so I think conversation exists kind of in your head, and play is very physical and about where your heart is. And we use that when we devise. We make theatre through play, and we create stories through play. We don't sit around a table and talk about it, because it's too intellectual, it's too heavy in the head. Whereas if you get up and you play and you start telling stories, you're just free, and that flow comes out where you see kids do it. They just going, and then we're in a castle, and then we're in space, and then we do this, and we do this, la 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 la. Whereas if you sit down with your pen and paper or conversation, you can get stuck in your head, and you can't play. Learning how to learn about people is very revealing. In an audition, you can see where someone is at in an audition by how they play in the room. I was at an audition once where I thought, and I was the audition, had taken the audition, and I thought I was being free, and in my head I was really confident. But when I looked back, I was like, oh yeah, all of the things that they asked us to choose, like they asked us to be an animal. I was a little mouse in the corner hanging like owl. Like I wasn't a lion. In my head I was, but physically I was like, yeah, I was nervous and feeling shy, and that totally came out. And subconsciously, play reveals a lot about where you're at and how you feel about a situation. It's an interesting question about who you are as a person. In our devising process in the show we're doing, Muddy, we invite young people to come in and build and use loose play objects. And some children are very considered and quiet, and we had a fairyland and two girls worked together, and everything was very small and beautiful and pretty, and they were intent on this little corner here, and that's how they were choosing to play. So you could start to explore what that says about who they are as people and what they find interesting. They found the crackling of paper more interesting and the noise it was making than another couple of brother and sister who were building a big tree house and throwing net up and like rah, this energy. So you could start to pick out qualities of somebody, I think, from how they are handling objects.
And I think there's an interesting, we sometimes have a challenge of when parents become overly involved in what's being made, it sometimes changes from being play to being building, to being demonstrating, to being creating something that is already formed elsewhere as an idea, rather than free-form play, just to see what happens as you're building. And so part of the process that we've gone through in how we have designed the show is about the right kind of forum to remove parents just in the right sort of moments and give them something else to do, or there's always they're always welcome to come and step in and join in the play. But if there's too many hands on deck, too many grown-ups, it can become too heady, and it becomes about making the perfect rocket ship that's structurally sound and also it looks like a rocket ship. Whereas the kids, if they without that, might have made the weird slimy monster rocket ship that's got that's also made out of zombie limbs, and that's where they
and they are sure they know that it doesn't have to look like a rocket for them to totally see that it's a rocket.
Yeah.
What is it? It's a rocket. Oh yeah, of course it is. Sorry, yeah. Definitely they imbue it. Yeah.
Maybe there's more imagination as well in a child that's been battered out of us over the years.
Yeah.
And answering that question, I sort of agree, answered it a bit like yourself, that in trying to put teams together for work, and it's conversations on email and meetings in cafes and stuff like that, and you think you get on with people, great, this is going to be brilliant, and then we get in the room and like, oh God, I can't work with any of these people. And I think there's a thing about, also, you're sort of touching on it a bit about sort of energy and dynamic in play. So I can be totally not an alpha male, very much a beta, and when there's big voices in the space, I'll go and be the mouse in the corner. But the show I'm going to make isn't about the mouse in the corner, but I'll make it when everyone else has gone home. And there's something about kind of overpowering voices within play and who the leader is, and allowing other people to lead their own ideas and things. And a lot of the time, you sort of see that in playgrounds and in parks and stuff, and how kids play and your kids are playing, and then, oh, that kid comes along and they really want to play with that kid, but then they never really get to do anything because that kid has to make all the rules, you know. So I think you do learn a lot of stuff out of play. Maybe you do learn lots more and different stuff than you do from conversation, but also who you play with and how you play really alters depending on who's in the mix.
People can make you feel, you can be in a room with people who push all the right buttons, and that energy and that playfulness can be like, wow, and then it is chemistry, and sort of alchemy, isn't it, in play? Yeah. It's very much about playing with the right people. I can definitely spot older kids who play. I've learned that. Yeah. They make all the rules.
And teachers, like you were talking about parents taking the control of a play situation. Yeah. Teachers can be really bad at it. Yeah. When they come to workshops and, okay, today we're going to be making a thing. Right, children, this is how you make a thing. Like, oh my God, yeah. Leave the room.
Yeah, we do school version. We've been doing workshop plays with the development of Muddy, and the idea of Muddy is there are no rules. It's a play space. You can create and do whatever. And before they come in, you can see the teachers having a conversation with them about, okay, we're going to be respectful. We're going to be calm. You're going to be quiet. You're going to be listened to. What everything's going to happen. They do this list of rules, and so as soon as they come in into the Muddy space, we're like, wow! You can see them like, oh, I don't know what I'm meant to do. I've been told this information, and one of the reasons that we created this project was this idea. We're kind of coming up against, I say it with my son as well, I catch myself with this, be careful, be careful, be careful, and telling kids to be careful too much. It's like counterintuitive. They're so good at setting their own risk limitations. Our show's all about risk and about trusting kids to be able to walk across a plank of wood and balance and find it themselves. And what happens when you get parents or teachers getting involved is there, be careful, makes the kid go, oh, and then up here in my head, I'm not physically with the balance that I'm doing, and the kid probably will might fall off, or be close to falling off in a way they wouldn't if that intervention hadn't happened. And as soon as we create this free space, the kids grab mallets and they grab stuff, the parents or the teachers are still there saying, be careful, be careful. And most of the accidents are when adults get involved. Most of the accidents that happen are a parent bending down to help a kid, the kid turning around and banging them on the head.
Or indeed a parent when I have a sort of theory about the difference of scale of making of what you're, and how if a young person, if a kid is making a thing, they know like that they've put that bar there and they know they put that girder there, and they've kind of found a direct sensory engagement with these objects and these items, and they're finding their way around them. Whereas there are minor injuries that have kind of have been when like a grown-up has come in and then put in something else on top of that or inside that child hasn't learned themselves, they haven't touched it themselves, they haven't put it up there themselves, it's been done for them. And then they've not had a direct physical interaction with that object and then bump their head on it, because as far as they're concerned in their play, it doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist in their world of play. It's been put there by someone else. It's been prescribed for them, and that's where the kind of the risk of injury is heightened, because they just haven't, like their body hasn't learned it and learned their way around it.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. So we've got two kind of senses of play, haven't we? We've got open-ended child-led play, where the child determines their own intrinsic value for the play and what it wants to achieve. And then we've got more structured play that tends to be adult-led. And you make me laugh because when you talk about how teachers respond, because so many times we see groups of children coming into our shows and they sit down and the teachers stand at the front and they say, right, okay, everybody sit still, don't talk, I don't want to see any fidgeting, and don't forget to have fun. And they sit down. And I think that's very much the same with play as well. So I'm interested to know about whether you think there's any value in the latter part of play, the sort of more structured play, developmentally. Because I think you're all very much in the camp of unstructured free play.
Yeah, I think there is, if you want to if you're developing particular skills, so maybe if that was like learning a musical instrument or something, you need to be directed, you need to be led at times. You can make it all up yourself, but it's good to take some tips here and there.
There's a question around whether structure leads to curiosity. And what I picked up an instrument recently, and my first lesson was about just sit with the instrument, and I was like, what? It was an alien. Even though I'm an advocate of free play, I was like, no, can't you just tell me what I have to do? And she was just like feel for it, have a play. What does it sound like? Which bits do you like? What's your favourite bit? And I'll be back in half an hour. I was like, that's not teaching me anything. It was like an invitation to find out, led through my curiosity and interest in the object, to kind of have a feel of it. So then to find structure, there's a balance there where if you enforce structure, where's the joy and the kind of interest and the intrigue? Whereas I guess the camp of child-led play is like that the child leads you to what they really like doing and then find a way of structuring the play around that.
There's some research that's just come out of America, which is around the impact of play on childhood mental health. And they found a lot of research which says that that creative play, open-ended play, imaginative play has a huge impact on lowering anxiety levels. But actually structured play that's adult-led contributes more, I think, to the problem that children feel in terms of anxiety, particularly when they're school age as well. So it's interesting.
Doing it right.
Doing it right, yeah.
There is a set way of doing something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when there's no rules, you can't be wrong.
So do you think we've got a bit of a problem? Because certainly in the early years, we often align play with learning, don't we? So we talk about play being the serious business of childhood, that children learn through play. Do you think that there's an issue about whether we're minimising the importance of play through aligning it with learning, or do you think that that's maybe just my prejudice against the concept of learning as we understand it currently?
I think that people think that perhaps going out to the park and rootling around in a bush and climbing a tree isn't perhaps play or something, that play is toys and books, or like these are the tools for you to do that are available in the shop for you to play with, and that's what you should use. Whereas, like you're talking about making a spaceship, that this could be a spaceship if you've got the imagination or nothing else.
So with Toby yesterday with the sponge on the forecourt, and his little son Toby was just there was a soft bit of sponge that was part of our kit just out on the after we'd done our pat down. He was just completely engaged with it for an hour. Just like everything about it was interesting, and he was curious, and he was just finding out about this object and how it existed and playing for that long.
Was he learning?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
he was rolling it between his legs. So it's kind of like this physics, this tactileness. There's all kinds of. He doesn't understand what it relates to in terms of the school subjects. But he definitely learned. Definitely.
Yeah. Being able to having the freedom to experience that in any environment, having that experience out on, on the cobbles in Darlington, and then that is a very different experience to being given something to play with in a soft playground, or it can occur anywhere, and the excitement of being able to have that freedom to just experience objects and materials in any environment, that's play, and that's learning.
There's a reason that forest schools are getting more popular. This idea of get out there, play with sticks and stones, and be out in whatever the weather, just play and learn through that, rather than in classrooms, sat in lines, having to sit still, where if you fidget it's seen as a bad thing. It's like,
it's learning what your body can do, rather than how your body should be or should be restrained in order to learn. It's actually like the experience of that free play is that you discover just how far you can impact your environment, and the limitations are much further and wider than what you think.
A toy in a toy shop is always going to be a toy car, whereas this could be a rocket, it could be a boat, it could be a hat, it could be. So you're teaching them, what they're learning is that an abstract thing, something that for us, it occurs to us as just something that I put my coffee in so I don't burn my hands, but it could be anything. And that abstract idea is really important in just life, that you can go into somewhere where there's an environment that you're not comfortable with or you don't like, and you can change it. That abstract idea that you have power to create whatever you want to. It's great. Kids come in, a tree is a tree. If we don't teach them this abstract thinking, or why would it ever occur to you that you could climb a tree, that you could play with sticks, that you could build a rocket and go into space?
And that, like loose parts of play and giving the space to completely transform an environment, which is what in Muddy we do, and the worlds that they create at the end of the build is completely different from the moment they step in. But if they are learning, the innate learning there is about empowerment. It's about you can change and transform your environment, and that is something that is so vital to have going forward and growing up, because young people in environments need to know that they can change they can change their world around them.
And they can do whatever they want. If they want to make Marshmallow Kingdom with a hamster king, they absolutely can, and that's an amazing offer.
I'm watching kids doing their small world play stuff. So my older one doesn't do it so much, but my youngest one takes two Playmobil characters, a dragon and a clown or whatever, and it's so sweet to watch, and you don't really want to intervene because you'll break the magic, but they're having an argument or whatever it is, they're talking about the issues that have happened in that day and other things besides, and they're going to space and whatever, and just so brilliant. So there's all that imagination, there's all that about relationships, all that about problems.
You play it all out. You play it all out in a safe space, don't you? Whatever's happened in your day, you can play it.
And how much more valuable is that to my little boy than him being sat down by a parent and told, this is how the world works? Is he going to go, all right, I've got it now?
But that's how we learn about how the world works, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we rehearse social interactions, we process things which are traumatic to us through play, through the imagination. I think it's really fascinating, the way that children will often take something that they're really afraid of and will examine it through play, and that's often the foundation for something which then becomes the Hullabaloo show. So for example, we have a show for 2 to 4 year olds which is about being scared of the dark, and those kind of fundamental ideas of child development, about investigating those play opportunities, kind of blowing them apart imaginatively and then putting them back together and then sharing that narrative back is an important step, I think, in beginning to understand and make meaning. And that's why we often talk about making meaning rather than learning, because I think a lot of, particularly in early years, rather than learning, which seems to have different connotations, actually all of these experiences about meaning making. You touched on the kind of nostalgic thing about children playing outside and climbing trees and things. Do you think there's a lot in the media, particularly recently, people have talked a lot about how children don't get to play outside enough, there's not enough opportunities for them to kind of run around outside without adult supervision and that kind of thing because the world just doesn't feel safe enough anymore. Do you think that's the case, or do you think we're looking at that through a lens that maybe is not anticipating all of the other potential play opportunities that the modern world gives us?
Oh, I think the modern world has so much to offer play opportunities wise, but I do think from our research over the past 3 years that one of the kind of stats that we kind of, use is that children play 90% closer to home, they don't play as far away from home anymore. Because of that idea that the world's a scarier place, but the world isn't actually a scarier place. Our perception of it is that it's scarier, and that fear makes us want to be more protective and hold everything closer, or that perceived idea of that fear. I remember the freedom of being able to be like, okay, see you at dinner time, and then you're off. And I used to go to the woods and play and make swings and collect bluebells and make potions and fight and play games in the woods and then come back at dinner time. I don't think that happens from the research that we've done that often.
I think it's the news's fault.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Because everything is reported now, and reported with massive hysteria.
Yeah.
And so people go, oh, don't go out, there's bad people out there. And so the less people that go out, the more likely the person who goes out is going to meet the wolf, because they're the only one there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of our moral duty to send our kids out playing.
Yeah. Send them out, because what I think we're starting.
Sorry, is it possible we can comment on that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
There'll be an opportunity to comment in about 5 minutes time.
Right, you carry on.
I think what we're starting to see now is that we're starting to now see the impact of that. What's coming back is the impact of not giving, tightening the reins on kids and not giving them more freedom. It's a feeling of anxiety in kids. Anxiety is on the rise, depression's on the rise, and it's simple things like going out and playing on their own. In some places now it's illegal to climb trees, and you're like, why are we encroaching on all this and pulling it back? And we're starting now to look at the negative impact that's having. I do think there is definitely a switch to more playing inside, playing in spaces, having organised soft play areas where there's a gate that you can come in and parents sign your kids in and out, and this fear of kids disappearing is huge, and not to be dismissive of it, but that impact of not just letting free play and kids go to the playground, it does affect.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because there has been, particularly in the last few years, a massive explosion in places that people go to play.
Yeah.
Particularly in the last year or so, role play opportunities have really opened up as well, of varying quality, I think. and I'm really interested in whether that's a statement about people beginning to more formally recognise the place to play, whether it's just another way of adults controlling.
What do you mean by role play?
Kidzania, is that what it's called?
Kidzania, there's Tiny Town, there's whole franchises of role play centres where you go and you might have a hairdresser's corner or you can run a bank or whatever kind of thing. And these are now places that families spend a lot of time, as well as soft play. So there's a more formalised creative play focus. And that's an interesting new thing, isn't it? Because it certainly wasn't there 5 years ago.
It's still a place to play. It's still prescribed play.
So prescriptive.
It's really prescriptive. Forest fairy tales happen in forests. Everything happens in forests. They're magical, mysterious places to play, or just outside in general. The freedom that you have being outside, and that idea of sticks and stones and trees. It can be anything. You can play anything. You can be anyone, and it doesn't matter. And it's not a colour, and it's not a prescribed thing. And the girls don't have to be hairdressers, and the boys don't have to be bank, whatever. All of these social constrictions that start to come into this idea of role play and play, that doesn't exist in a forest where everything's free.
And it's about the and as well, you could it takes away the possibility of maybe you want to imagine being a hairdresser and a fireman and a zombie fighter and all of that, because that's what actual grown adults are, and we are not one thing, we are a multitude of things. We should be allowed, and that should exist in play, and so that the prescribed sort of role playing area places are just
Not a fan.
And are they places that are designed by adults for children? Are they designed, there are places that are starting to come out that do communicate with children and young people and are young people led, and they come from young people. There are lots of skate parks and adventure playgrounds that are starting to pop up that are children led, and that's great. Because otherwise it's still an adult's idea of what is play and what children should be playing with.
And quite a lot of the time they feel like somewhere to dump your kids while you go to the mall. Really, and it's all devised around money for Unilever or something like that.
It's tricky though. There are 5 set things that are great for your kids to do, that are advised with this kind of dangerous, risky play, or the idea of these things. And one of them is to play with fire, one of them to have a pocket knife, and all of them make parents go, oh my god. One of them is to play with heights, and one of the main ones is to play away from your parents. Play away from adults. Let kids play with kids away from being observed and watched by grown-ups, because then they're truly independent and free, and what they're learning is to be independent beings. And that's, when you talk to parents, and I'm like a new parent, there's an element of going, okay, but it's about training, about how to create that feeling in society that that's okay and beneficial, and the impact of not doing that's huge and potentially really destructive.
Brilliant. That feels like a very good point to open it up to the audience. So does anybody have any comments or questions?
I have a small contribution. There are 34 outdoor play areas in Darlington. And about half a dozen of those, their play capability is being compromised by local issues such as antisocial behavior, bullying, broken glass, vandalism, and the ROSPA need for safe surfaces and stuff like this. So these play spaces, which could be safe spaces for kids to play in, are under threat, and they need, my view is they need to have more play activities in them for them to have less antisocial behavior. I mean, one of the things kids learn from playing is a pecking order. So you need to have play activities which are egalitarian. For example, there used to be roundabouts, but now you get spinners, and they individual spinners, so kids can individually spin rather than going on a big roundabout and being whirled off by bullies or whatever. So there's a number of technical fixes, but there's also like a social fix. You've got to actually use these play areas. I would love to see Jabberwocky Market, or the people that organize this event, to come out to some of these play areas and put stuff on for the local kids, because that's where they are. They're in these local play areas, not down here, not in this town, not in the center of town.
And I guess if stuff's being vandalised, does that mean there's a massive something missing for teenagers?
Yeah, I've just done a survey for one play area, and all the kids said they want more adventurous equipment. But because some equipment has been damaged, the council doesn't want to put any different kind of equipment in because they might get damaged. And then there's the surface. They have to have this rubberized surface, which is, I suppose, reasonably okay. But why not sand, wood chips, or whatever? Those things are actually more expensive than a rubberized surface. But there isn't a diversity. There isn't a richness and diversity in the play environments for kids to learn all the different things you have to learn.
And austerity budgets are gone.
There's a huge thing on the rubber, that rubber matting for playgrounds is generally about 60% of the cost of playgrounds, and it has been proven to have no benefit, or it's no different from concrete. It doesn't make any difference to the
ROSPA catalogue of surfaces. If the council doesn't use that particular surface, they're liable for claims.
And then it becomes, we're living in a society that's about claims and insurance, and that's more important than actual the benefits of play and the cost of it.
And the wood chip stuff you can get free if you know people who manage a woodland, stuff like that. If it all works together and joined up different businesses and different ideas, then somebody's leftover materials can go and
be a
benefit
place.
somewhere else.
There's an incredible place called The Land. Have you heard of that in North Wales? And it's basically that. It's set up by a woman called Claire Griffiths, and she has taken over a land that was disused, and it had needles and glass and broken shopping trolleys in it, and so it was essentially a risky playground anyway, but not in a positive and constructive way. She took it from off the council, invited local industry and business to come and donate pallets, tyres, all kinds of stuff. It's got, do you remember those big wooden concrete things that are now banned from playgrounds? Loads of them there. And it's full of junk, essentially, and it's open from 3 to 5 every day and at the weekends, and the kids, it's got no rules, big sign above it saying no rules, and the kids come and play however they want to play, and there's fire burning all the time, and there are 3 play workers. Their main job is just to make sure that nobody actually gets hurt, like just to kind of keep an eye on things, but they stay out of the way. When we first visited, it's the kind of place where as an adult you want to go, God, I want to just tidy it all up. And that looks really dangerous. This kid was walking past, like, wielding a pickaxe. And being like, I'm coming and smash it down. Oh my God. They haven't had an accident there for 10 years. And the kids totally are free to play. And like you were saying about the social structures that happen in free play, they have their own hierarchy, they create dens, they're teaching themselves to flip off the top of big structures that they build onto crash mats. It's big and it's epic and it's loud and it's free, but that requires, I'd love that. I'd love to see that in every town, to have that, but that requires someone to manage it, someone to look after it, and I understand that's, from a council's point of view, that's probably not great, but it's like, this is so good.
And someone to be a direct advocate for it as well, like Claire, is that, like, with, you know, everything's been risk benefit assessed in that in the land, so every part of that play environment has a file, and risk benefit assessment is it's like a normal risk assessment. There's also a line where you look at the benefits of taking those risks. So, like, having a fire, yes, someone might get burnt, someone might catch fire, they might get out of control. Like, those are all the risks. But the benefits of having a fire burning are that the kids learn how to manage a fire safely. They learn how to keep a fire going. They learn how to put it out when they need to. It's also a real social thing. They can gather around the fire, and as the nights draw in, they can cook over it and they can keep warm. Like, those are all the benefits of having a fire. So those kind of outweigh the risks there. But that takes, having the land takes an advocate like Claire.
She went out, and the kids didn't need convincing of the benefit of the land. They got it straight away, but the parents and the council did. And she was saying that her job was to go and advocate for it, and she did that by taking eggs into a workshop environment, and she invited everybody to throw eggs at each other, and the adults, and they were like, what? As soon as they started, they could not stop, and they loved it, because it's play, and it was like to try and break through this idea of what play is and the freedom and the exhilaration of free play. So it does, and mess, and it needs that advocate to do that. Yeah,
great stuff. Has anybody got any other questions or comments?
I just think it's an interesting thing as well about play space, and we talked there about playgrounds, but it's kind of the paucity of free space and public space, and time is also an issue. I kind of think it's interesting. So much play being now digital and online and engagement with friends, but it wasn't so much an issue in my day, because like when I was growing up, you'd walk across the fields to get to your school, you could have your little adventures on the way down, and you'd sit down in class. But I just wonder, to what degree do you feel that there's an impact in terms of adult behaviour and the way society is structured now? It impacts, because if you're a little kid growing up and you're not seeing many places where adults are just hanging out, other than if it's a park or if it's the seaside. I still see the seaside as being like one of the world's greatest adventures, because whether it's a dead seal, loads of crabs, loads of, you'll see people playing in family units, or you'll see people playing on their own or adventuring and just exploring in that way. But I just wonder how we can bring that into environments that are more urban, or or communities that may not have access to the seaside.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and like you guys asked the question at the beginning, it's like, who plays? One person put their hand up. It's like, how do we create places where adults play and people can see adults playing? And that's there's nothing more joyful for young people than seeing adults making fools of themselves and being idiots, because it breaks down that barrier of what an adult should be and what a kid is, and
There are some great examples of playful spaces now though in new architecture, just those little fantastic little fountains that spurt up, and you can see whole families running through them, people of all ages. And I sometimes wonder if we have a sense of that we romanticise the past a bit in terms of people playing, that there's a much greater understanding now of free play and of creative play, and of parents, particularly if they're busy working parents, sometimes carving out special time. That was never the case really, from certainly my parents' generation. They wouldn't get that sort of dedicated time. They tend to be given a train set and to be sent outside for 8 hours or whatever, which has the benefits that we've talked about, but that's special one-on-one time, and the understanding of that importance of that, I think, is quite a modern phenomenon too.
Do you think that's across the board though of society? Because we hear a lot, sorry, I'm from Hullabaloo as well, but we hear a lot about, I don't know how to play with my children, I can't remember how to play, I don't know what to do with that, who look at, all of these, I suppose it's perception, but also it's this thing of I've never done it, or that learned behaviour. So I think that for some areas you do have that time or that understanding, but I still think for many there's a barrier there, whether that's within themselves or within their own upbringing. But also, I'm just picking up on, we still have in this town signs on fields that say no playing, or no ball games, or no blah, blah, blah. And I think the playground thing is an interesting thing, but actually if you look at one of our biggest playgrounds, and I know there's been vandalism, but it's set in one of the most magnificent parks, which actually has hundreds of trees and lakes and bridges and, which are all there for playing. And Baltic in Gateshead did a playground exhibition. That was brilliant. I don't know how long ago, 2 years ago. And actually, one of the things that was really magnificent about that was the film, which was, and the historical sort of exhibition of play. And actually one of the most joyous moments for me was watching these 2 children from, I think it was Vietnam, just sliding down this mud hill. They were chucking the cap, and then they were sliding down the hill, chucking the cap, sliding down the hill. And then they were taking bigger risks, and you could see that. And it was sort of this like leading, thing. So, and that was the freedom just to be able to do that and to explore, not just in a playground or in a space, but actually going, this is a hill, and I'm gonna just go for it. But also watching people within an environment change, not just playing in the sandpit, but playing, in and out of the sandpit, or pushing the boundaries, I suppose, for that.
Pushing, that's a really good kind of place to go with plays, is about pushing. Some of it is about pushing boundaries, and if we don't give the spaces for that to happen, those boundaries get pushed in destructive ways, because they still have to be pushed.
Yeah.
So if you don't give them that space, they get pushed with vandalism, with kind of alcohol, drugs.
Yeah.
They go that way because that's risky, and that's what they've got access to. So play, pushing boundaries and freedom.
I was just going to say, do you think that technology now is actually inhibiting play, or do you think it's just opening up different channels of play through like apps for kids and stuff? Because I've got a 5-year-old, and she's like, "Mummy, I want an iPad for Christmas," and I'm like, there is no so-and-so's going at school, so-and-so's going at school, and I'm thinking, my God, really? Like, I find it a bit terrifying, the amount of time that small people spend looking at screens while their parents are also looking at screens.
I don't think it's actually play, I think it's something else.
Like apps out there for like, we've got one that's like for creating music or whatever, but that I'm still very like, you could play on it once every 2 weeks for half an hour kind of thing. But I don't know what your thoughts are on how technology.
They're kind of learning tools, but I don't think it's play. And that all started with like watching telly and playing Space Invaders, and we started all that. And it's getting worse. It's exponentially. We're never going to talk to each other again, let alone play with each other.
You don't get the chemistry, the dynamic, the interaction online. It's definitely got a place, and it's definitely a great tool, and there's so much I think still to explore with it. But it feels a bit like we're kind of monkeys with a tool. We don't really know or understand how to use it properly yet, and we're being more destructive than we realise with it in some ways. But you don't get to be in a room of the dynamic and chemistry, and that doesn't happen online. And the other thing, I guess, the other bigger social thing is that you don't get to see the impact of something. So you don't get, you're saying about social systems that you get in through play. At the land, the kids, if somebody does something, someone smashed somebody else's den down, so the other kids got together and they smashed his den down, because there's consequences to your actions and you see the direct impact. Whereas online, you don't, that online bullying, all of that kind of play that happens, you don't see the impact of what you're saying. If I upset somebody, say something upsetting, you don't see the impact on someone else's face. And through play, you see, if you push someone too hard and they fall over and it hurts them, you know that you've gone too far. You don't get that online. You don't know if you've gone too far or not.
I know it's again that thing of like testing those limits sort of gently, not gently, but like in an incremental way. Whereas online there is the risk of that, you don't see that response, so you go too far, and like the extremity of some of the things that are said and the things, that it's disproportionate because there hasn't been the kind of arena to really test that and get feedback and test and get feedback, which is what like playing in a physical environment that allows you in such a direct way. But it is also like not like, and I think there is, young people are incredibly social and sociable, and their social networks work in such a kind of vast and complicated way compared to like maybe when we were growing up, and also cognitively, like how problem solving skills and all of that, like that's really facilitated by playing with technology in those ways.
I read something about children. Some children now struggling with like things in 3D because they're just looking at things in 2D.
Yeah, I mean running workshops with kids, like scissor skills. I've noticed like the drop in just really simple things like scissor skills, and like kids being able to like handle something. Scissor skills. But I haven't been really clear.
I haven't really. Toby's like a year and a half now, and I haven't. He watches David Attenborough, but I've been really. I've not purposely, intentionally, not put him in front of a screen or had a screen on, because the reading I've done around the fact that you don't learn anything from a screen. It's not, you're not getting anything back, you're just watching. And so it's got a different, when you're older you are able to process it a bit more, but the idea of it just giving you information without you having any control or being able to tactilely pick something up, but it edits in a way that, like with the scissors, like in a film or something, the edit of something, you throw a ball, the cut is of the ball being thrown, someone else catches it, but you don't see what happens in the middle, so you don't learn how a ball moves. Because they don't understand film and editing, they're just seeing a ball is there and a ball is there. That's how balls move through space. Whereas if they see a ball being thrown, they understand that, if that makes sense. The kids don't understand that's one shot was in a house and now you're outside. It's like, oh, that's how you go from outside to inside.
And it'll be different for every child, every person as well. Like some, one might take a lot longer to kind of physically learn how to throw a ball and what that feels like compared to another, and like just having the space for all of that to happen isn't there when learning through screens because it's so prescriptive. Yeah.
There's a thing with city kids and wilderness spaces where children have never been to wilderness spaces or very rarely do, keep falling over because the floor's not flat. Just keep tumbling around. Get out there.
Does anybody in the audience feel that new technologies have made their adult life more playful? I'm interested to know, because the verb that we use is playing on our phone. We've talked about the impact on children. Does anybody feel that their life is more playful as a consequence of their technology?
Not personally, but I do know a lot of people who do play games on their phones.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't have been playing those games 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Does that make you more playful?
Technology. it's an alien thing. It's not coming in here. It's not. But like, you go to say, hiya, to somebody, and they're just doing this. Hiya! And there's nothing.
Look at people in a restaurant or around a table and they're doing this.
But no one's talking to anybody. And I was thinking, is it me? And I feel quite like I better go and live somewhere else, or stop at the house or something, you know. But I was at a supermarket the other day and there was some Christmas stuff. You think, oh, yeah, okay. But there was a big thing of talking of snowballs, indoor snowballs. And I took the thing off the shelves. And you sort of think, you did have to squeeze things. Anyway, this one was, well, you got a snowball, I won. And we ended up having a snowball fight in the shop. And the amount of tubs of snowballs that went off the shelf was ridiculous. We were laughing.
You should have had your own commission.
And it was like, you know, I felt embarrassed at the end, but you know, you thought this was fun, but then you feel you sort of think, I'm supposed to be doing this.
I'm glad they let you out.
You know, it's like.
Play is a really liberating way of connecting with somebody without having to have to communicate anything through.
But nobody was playing with me when they were doing
Yes. The person behind you who said that they felt that they played lots in their lives, what mediums do you use to play?
Like tiny children that can't speak. So
okay. How old are your kids?
6 months and nearly 2. So I end up pretending to be most of the that's
lucky you.
So without them I would be a boring adult person that doesn't play.
Something about that's about definition as well, because we're talking about what makes playing it is. Yeah, I used to play football and I enjoyed that. That's the main place I most played, and you can say it's doing this, but I'd also sit down playing a flat with a dog, reading a book, listening to music, smelling things, and on the seaside. You know, and I kind of think that one of the difficulties with adult life is that you have definitions and groups. You know, I'll be part of this group or that group. And once you're outside of work, I don't think there are necessarily the same degree of spaces where you know, people will just have a relaxed space on the way home, where everything's quite busy, it feels. So I think it's important somehow to...
There's a big increase in hobbies, isn't there? So there's adults looking for opportunities to go somewhere and be creative.
Yeah.
You know, which is again quite a new thing, isn't it?
Maybe going for walks is a thing, it's not competitive.
Yeah.
You're out and about. It's an imaginative space, it's a good conversation space. It's not like a game of squash.
I do worry that as you say that thing of screens, that habit of it being part of your life, or just remember being on the exchange when I was like young, and the kids there would have an hour's walk to school. So they'd just get up at 7:30 and walk whatever 5 miles to school. So it's you'd have to have a conversation on some element of play, or you'd have 2 hours of really dull time. So I don't know. I think it would be nice to think there were ways of encouraging that. Just having the confidence somehow. I suppose it's building confidence. I think you could own that rather than things being enforced on you. By the way society is, just somehow I think for play to encourage confidence or ownership or a sense to challenge things in a way.
Self-efficacy. That basically play builds self-efficacy, gives you the sense of agency that you think you can do something, then you do it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. A quick plug. We are building an inspiring place to play and learn in Darlington currently. The Hullabaloo, which is a new venue for children and families, opens this December on Borough, just around the corner from the Hippodrome, the new Hippodrome. And right at the centre of that building, in consultation with children from Darlington schools, we have a creative play area which will be full of inspiring installations and opportunities for that free play that we've talked about. And absolutely, your points there about it being a place where children can have agency, that's absolutely right at the heart of the philosophy of the whole building and everything that underpins our work. So I hope you'll come and visit us there. It's very exciting. It's looking absolutely beautiful. It's very nearly finished. And it's great that Darlington has got this this palace of play that we're going to celebrate for the benefit of all children and their grown-ups. So I'd like to thank our panel, Kirsty, Hazel and Ed, for being so brilliant, and thank you all for coming as well.